on Q2, crime calls to the Colonial.
We get gunfire in our alley, and there's people that are high on meth.
This Billings problem spot is now the focus of city leaders. And now a task force is being created to help identify the issues here and at other problem properties.
This just allows us to just align our resources into one direction and hopefully come up with either quicker solutions, better education, and see how far we can get with it.
We'll have more on their mission to stomp out crime one home at a time. The MTN News starts right now. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. I'm Russ Riesinger. Our top story tonight, the city is taking major steps to overhaul what they call problem properties. Homes or apartment complexes in Billings that suck a tremendous amount of city resources from police and medical services. Just recently, city leaders put a Billings landlord on notice, saying he better clean up his apartment complex notorious for crime. As Q2's Andrea Lutz reports, after the safety mill levy passed, the city is now in a better place to enforce code violations.
The city is asking the landlord of the Colonial Apartments to clean up his act. That is because city resources are constantly flocking to this property, so much so that in the past 7 years, 1,600 times they've recorded calls coming here. The city is over it.
At the corner of 27th and 3rd Avenue South.
It is a hub for crime.
It's a property historic to Billings, but infamous for crime.
Their life revolves through the Colonial.
This building and the problems tied to it, so notorious.
It is notorious and has been for many, many, many years.
That longtime Southside resident Catherine Card has tracked it.
I began tracking the crime statistics, and that really it has the highest crime rate in town that I could see.
Well, the numbers are staggering. In the span of just 138 days, we tallied the calls. 94 different times police and medical responded to the Colonial. Everything from assaults to drugs, even a stabbing and a shooting, making for some of the highest number of police calls to just one area of Billings.
Did that shock you when you saw that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I can't say it any other way. It was surprising to me. And so that's why we're determined to do something about it.
It's those astounding numbers that's compelled Billings City Administrator Chris Kukalski to engage.
In this case, Mr. Skoggy has got several properties in town, and so we're asking him to step up and do a better job.
Just recently, the city sent this letter to the landlord of the Colonial Apartments, John Skoggy. It highlights the Colonial as a nuisance property for not only structural issues, but also the ongoing criminal activity and an extraordinary call volume for a property of its size. Skoggy owns several other rentals in town, all with the same issues.
Doing things like this, honestly, is to start calling out and have a much more public conversation and maybe some peer pressure.
And it seems Skoggy doesn't want to talk about it. He headed to his home in Billings, where the letter arrived, and although several cars were in the driveway, no answer at the door, and no answer on the phone.
It won't let me leave a voicemail.
Skoggy has owned the Colonial for decades, and the crime issues have been mounting for as long. So why the push from the city now?
As you know, for 3+ years, 4 years now almost, improving the safety of Billings has been our #1 priority.
The passing of the recent public safety levy has done that, increasing the capacity of code enforcement, enabling the city to call Skoggy out on his numerous violations.
We get gunfire in our alley, and there's people that are high on meth.
But Card isn't so convinced. Living just 2 blocks away from the epicenter of all the crime, she's been rallying for council to do more for years.
You really get the sense that there's not anything going to move him unless he gets fined a significant amount.
Card is vowing to not back down because she says this is her community.
The other side of it is that I'm in touch with what the problems are when I live among them.
And Kukalski agrees. A better Billings means tackling problem properties like this head on.
It's also starting to have a negative impact on property values, on neighborhoods, and on safety.
In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
This house might be a sight for sore eyes. Like the Colonial, it's one of several properties in Billings that code enforcement has deemed high priority. And it's one of many reasons why the city has created a new task force hoping to attack this problem from a variety of angles.
Now we've got tomatoes and just herbs and strawberries and basil.
Stephanie Anderson and her husband have lived on South 29th Street since April, but next to their neat complex of apartment homes lies what the city of Billings calls a problem property.
Owners of the properties on either side are problem properties that were approached by the same individuals that took this, that used to be a problem property, offered them to take it over and provide exactly the same thing that is being done here, and they refused.
Unfortunately for the Andersons, that means this particular home has become a haven for squatters.
So that property is being used for people when they need shelter, which is in Billings, it's a pretty big problem.
The city of Billings is now targeting these properties and the problems they create by introducing a new task force. Homes like these are draining city resources.
We're seeing, a few properties in Billings that are causing, kind of an excessive amount of calls, whether it be police, code enforcement.
The goal of the Problem Property and Crime Strike Force is to be proactive and to identify nuisance properties before the problems start piling up.
What can we go in and do to either educate some of the property owners, if it's code enforcement issues, or, if we've got, a neighborhood, disputes going on, what can we do to try to resolve that dispute before it escalates further?
The task force will be made of community members, city leaders, including the fire marshal and a representative from animal control. A coordinated effort to tackle the problem made possible by recent passage of the Public Safety Mill Levy.
We want police involved on this because that's the law enforcement arm, of this, along with our crime analyst. Code enforcement is the other big, piece and player here.
It's an approach that Stephanie Anderson certainly supports. She just wants property owners to be held accountable and for the temporary residents who call the house next door home to be safe.
There's nothing safe about sheltering in an abandoned home.
In Billings, Alina Howder, MTN News.
A high-speed chase ends in a fiery crash this morning just east of Billings. That incident began when a Montana Highway Patrol trooper spotted a vehicle speeding and cutting off other vehicles in a construction zone on I-90 East. MHP Captain Kyle Hayter says the trooper attempted to stop the vehicle, but the driver fled, leading the trooper on a chase that reached 150 miles per hour. The fleeing vehicle eventually crashed into a guardrail along the eastbound lanes of Interstate 94, then crossed over the highway, striking the westbound guardrail before rolling down a hill. The trooper and firefighters were able to rescue the passenger before the vehicle became fully engulfed in flames. He was rushed to the hospital with critical injuries. The driver ran, but he was arrested a short time later. That investigation is still ongoing. More changes in the leadership of the Billings Clinic. This past Friday, the hospital announced that CEO Dr. Scott Elner had resigned effective immediately after a little more than 2 years on the job. Well, today, Q2 learned that Matt Frederickson England, the hospital's chief compliance and integrity officer, is also resigning to take a new job in Missouri. His last day is tomorrow. In an email that Q2 obtained, Frederickson England called his short time with the clinic enjoyable yet difficult. The hospital, which is Billings' largest employer, has begun a nationwide search for a new CEO.
A lot of heat building in across the western U.S., triple digits around Las Vegas, southern portions of Utah. You see the heat in through Idaho and even the Pacific Northwest. And as we start getting into the next couple of days, a lot of that heat will start to build in where we have readings into the 80s across Montana and northern Wyoming today. We're going to swap that out for 90s and even possible triple digits. And even today, the temperatures across the state right now 5 degrees warmer in Billings than we were yesterday at this time, 10 degrees warmer in Livingston. So by the time we start looking into the next few days, all that heat builds in. As temperatures get hotter, things will stay dry. And with light winds, at least it keeps the fire risk down. Forecast details are only a few minutes away.
Some good news to report tonight as gear stolen from a Billings firefighter has been found this afternoon. The red duffel bag and all of its belongings were discovered by a woman in a backyard as she was watching over her neighbor's house. It was located just a quarter mile away from where it was taken. A Billings firefighter had around $6,000 of gear stolen out of his vehicle either Friday night or Saturday morning. Firefighters say the thief appeared to rummage around inside the bag but left everything behind. The city and firefighters thank the Billings community for all the help. Well, still to come on the MTN 530 News here on Q2, a new Brazilian steakhouse is looking to buck the trend in the Magic City. We'll dish out the details and take you inside next. And in sports, it's officially football season. That means it's time for Game Changers. We'll dive into the top 5 plays from a busy Friday night.
The MTN 530 News continues right after this.